Since the COVID epidemic, homeschooling in the U.S. has taken off at an increasing rate. In New Hampshire alone, children enrolled in homeschooling has increased 40% above pre-COVID levels. But this new wave of alternative education is coming at a price, one that threatens all of those of us who are not among the wealthy elite. Dismantling of public education is currently being fast-tracked, one that seeks to build a two-tier education system, one for the rich and one for the lower classes. A new phenomenon has appeared, microschooling. The idea is to make homeschooling into like an Airbnb type service through a company called Prenda and others. Essentially what happens is a homeschooling mother registers as a teacher and allows other parents to send their children to these so-called schools. The parents of these children have a choice of homeschooling services based on whatever criteria they choose. Some of the arrangements are based on a family co-op type agreement. A mother in one family may teach science while a father in another family teaches them math. This is creating a private school-driven service intended to destroy public education. There's homeschools that are receiving taxpayer money. Education savings accounts also funnel thousands of dollars to families who choose alternative forms of education. The nonprofit sector is also heavily invested. These so-called school choice advocates are spending millions of dollars in charitable donations to homeschooling organizations. As reported by the Washington Post, vouchers that once paid only for tuition at private and parochial schools can now, in some places, be used for homeschoolers. Most sweeping are education savings account, or ESAs, which allow for families to claim state tax dollars to use at their own discretion for any education expense. In that way, the money follows the student instead of going to the local public school. It flows wherever a family chooses. That can include Prenda, Pod fees, online classes, or homeschool curriculum, as well as tuition at private schools. Venture capitalists have also poured millions of dollars into this growing industry where they see huge potential to get a return on investment. So what's the big deal? Well, the children are getting a substandard education, and that is bad for all of society in general, if it can even be called an education. The National Center for Education Statistics' 2019 survey showed that nearly 60% of parents who chose homeschooling said religious instruction was a motivation in their decision to educate at home. In other words, anti-science, anti-evolution, anti-pro-choice. Today, we get a different message. One that makes accusations of a woke conspiracy. Parents are complaining about acknowledging the history of slavery and native genocide, and are also quite prevalent as a justification for homeschooling. In many states, there's little to no regulation regarding homeschooling, meaning that parents are free to teach however they please. Almost universally, these parents have no credentials in education. Their work is wholly unaccredited and unregulated. So how do you judge the quality of such an education? The founder of Prenda, Kelly Smith, says, market signals. You see a marketplace full of options. You evaluate it based on all of the market signals. If you pick one that is not accomplishing what you want to accomplish, you switch. So, in other words, nothing. Or you could just have one program that does the job. So much for the alleged efficiency of the market. And also, this claim relies on several fallacies, like the perfect knowledge fallacy and the assumption that the market and people in it are always rational. The quality of the education is dismal. An evaluation of Ohio's EdChoice scholarship program by the Fordham Institute in 2016 showed that the students who had moved to private schools lost ground on test scores. The students who used vouchers to attend private schools have fared worse academically compared to their closely matched peers attending public schools. The study finds negative effects that are greater in math than in English language arts. Such impacts also appear to persist over time, suggesting that the results are not driven simply by setbacks that typically accompany any change of school. A 2017 study of Washington, D.C.'s Opportunity Scholarship Program by the Institute of Education Sciences found that after 1 year, the OSP had statistically significant negative impact on the mathematics achievement of students offered or using scholarships. It shouldn't be unexpected that a person who is homeschooling, a person who does not have an education in educating people, isn't able to do the job. You have to be educated in the field that you're talking about in order to teach it. Someone who knows nothing cannot teach something. The plot here is very obvious. Under the guise of freedom of choice, essentially what's happening is the public school system is being dismantled. People are instead giving taxpayer money to private companies instead of it actually going to the education system, which very desperately needs it and which has been suffering from a lack of funding for many decades now. So, I mean, it's very clear what happens. They defund the public education system, says it's not up to par, and then come up with private institutions that can all of a sudden magically provide. And then that's used as the justification for dismantling the public education system. So we know what happens out of this. Essentially what happens is you have a huge divide between the top and the bottom. And guess where resources always flow? They always flow to where the money is, to those who have the money. Hence how capitalism actually works. So the rich end up with all the education and the people on the bottom end up with like religious fundamentalist training that hardly even qualifies as education. And then what do you get? You get an ignorant mass that's easy to control. I mean, that was always kind of the point. And one of the reasons why we even got a basic education system where everybody participated was because capitalists essentially needed the general educational level of people to be higher in order to function in the new jobs that were available. Now, they may get that here, or they may even actually lose that, because we see that the literacy rates in the US, while they are still well within the 80s and 90s, the level to which the average person can read is about grade 8, which means it's essentially less than high school. The education system is not doing it, and these replacements are not doing it either. Now, traditionally, homeschooling has actually produced better students with more knowledge. The problem is this is not the same thing. This is not people who are dedicated to education that are educating people. These are people who believe in conspiracy theories to take God out of everything, and that there's some kind of evil plot by the government to brainwash their children into all sorts of nonsense conspiracy theory type of beliefs, which vary upon person, but don't seem to mind taking taxpayer dollars to get an education, showing at least a little bit of hypocrisy in that regard. So we're going to end up with something like idiocracy, except the rich aren't going to actually be dumb. It's only the lower classes, and even the middle class, which will shrink even further as a result of this, will be of a much substandard education, which is, why we have standards of education to begin with. So it's pretty clear here that what they're trying to do is not only just to make money by privatizing education, but to create an even greater divide between the rich and the poor, and thus to justify paying less taxes, to justify their supposed right to rule over us, etc. And that is largely what it is, a sense of entitlement. What you are going to lose is your right to a basic education. Now, education should be available for everybody, from the first day of kindergarten to a PhD. If you can prove that you can function at that level, you deserve the opportunity to be able to go and get an education to that degree. But that's not what the system wants. The system wants money. The system wants a divide between the rich and the poor, between those who rule and those who are ruled. And that's exactly what this is about. And all these efforts under so-called choice and to stop the woke mob are essentially just playing into that. Just another part of the system trying to create people that can be controlled by their class position, by their access to resources, by their access to education. In other words, it's just plain old capitalism again. Thank you for watching. If you like this program, then please head over to my Patreon page and set up a monthly donation. It's your donations that keep this program running. Also, if you would like, please rate, comment, subscribe, and share in various social media.